Um, let me begin by giving you some background details about the activities of the Unification Church in comparison with the other countries. Japan has played a very unique role, being their funding the global activities of the Unification Church. And so the nature of the harm experienced in Japan is distinct compared to other countries. Unlike in the United States or in South Korea, the Unification Church in Japan has long relied on aggressive fundraising tactics, including the so-called spiritual sales, where believers were pressured into purchasing overpriced religious items or making exorbitant donations. Followers were often told that failing to give would condemn their ancestors or bring misfortune. These tactics led many families into financial ruin. Japan became the church's most lucrative fundraising space, with estimates suggesting that hundreds of billions of yen were extracted from Japan followed over decades. This level of exploitation has not been insane in South Korea, the church's birthplace, or the United States. Now, we had this incident, very unfortunate incident in 2022, the assassination of the former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. This brought new scrutiny to the church, as the suspect cited his family's financial ruin due to his mother's devotion and excessive donations to the Unification Church. This led to public outrage, investigations, and a historical legal response, which has led to this court order, which I'll be presenting about. As you may already know, on March 25th, 2025, the Tokyo District Court made the decision to order the dissolution of the religious corporation known as the Family Federation of World Peace and Unification, commonly known as Unification Church, based on a request for the Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science, and Technology. This decision was truly historic. It was not a matter concerning the survival of a single religious corporation. It was a case that questioned how the judiciary would navigate the delicate balance between the freedom of religion guaranteed by the Constitution and the need to provide relief for serious social harm. So, now I would just be going into the case overview. One, this case was initiated by the Ministry of Education. And so they filed a request. With the Tokyo District Court seeking its dissolution. This request was based on Article 81 of the Religious Corporation Act, on the grounds that the organization committed an act which is clearly found to harm public welfare and substantially in violation of laws and regulations. Since due to time, I'll be skipping some parts. What the court had found was this: the Unification Church is a very strong centralized organization, has a very strong centralized organization structure, and a massive financial scale. The organization has the decision-making bodies. Now, and also the personnel and budget were centralized and controlled. Pastors who are head of the large local churches are allowed to were required to follow transport orders from the headquarters as a condition of the qualification, meaning that the personnel affairs are completely controlled by the headquarters. The budget of the local organization were also managed by the headquarters as a part of the church's overall budget, affording them no financial independence. And there was also a severe performance evaluation by using KPI. The financial scale. The court recognized the immense financial scale of the organization. For 8 years from the fiscal year of 2015 to 2022, the average annual income revenue approximately 40.9 billion yen, with the average annual expenditures of about 34.1 billion yen. Over 99% of this revenue came from member donations. In fiscal year 2021, The year before the assassination, the donations accounted for about 49.9 billion yen out of the total revenue of approximately 50 billion yen. Expenditures were mainly for missionary work, church operations, and overseas missions reports. The court revealed that as of the end of March 22nd, the church held total assets of about 113.6 billion yen, with a massive 82.0 billion yen in highly liquid cash and regular deposits. The spiritual sales practice of the Unification began around 1971. And around 1979, it became a social problem. And we have this first court case coming up in 1982. The court found that in 1982, the then Vice President Hideo Yamada stated, "Selling many pagodas is great achievement. We are moving from an era of a church to an era of economic activity. In Japan's case, business is the primary focus and the church is secondary." This clearly shows that he regarded the sales activities as a church achievement and explicitly promoted them in conjunction with proselytizing. And also, in 1984, they became convicted of criminal fraud, of threatening victims by saying, "The spirit of the child you aborted and your late husband who died of illness or suffering, and something terrible will happen to your children unless you help them achieve salvation," and extorted about 12 million yen in cash. Now, then, from like 2007, 2009, the church starts getting apprehended based on the Specific Commercial Transaction Act, which is a special transaction act that regulates transactions by like hiding your real intent. And so we have these various convictions coming up. And let me see. Now, these are the criminal investigations that has taken place. And these arrows show you that, these these investigations were being taken all over Japan. The overall picture of damage and compensation claims, the court verified the vast scale of damages claims against Unification Church by categorizing into civil judgments, settlements, and out-of-court agreements. The sum of these three categories reveals that at least 1,559 people claimed damages, and the total amount awarded by courts agreed to by the church reached approximately 20.448 billion. Civil judgments. In 32 court cases, the tort liability was recognized for 169 plaintiffs. Among these, the total amount awarded in 26 finalized judgments for 140 plaintiffs was about 1.8 billion yen. Court settlements. There were about 100 cases that ended in settlement, including litigation, involving 448 plaintiffs, and with the total settlement amount reaching about 6.1 billion yen. And also, there were about 971 out-of-court agreements, and the total settlement amount was about 12.5 billion yen. After the police went after the Unification Church in 2009, they issued this compliance declaration, in which this church claimed that it reformed its nature. However, the court cast serious doubt upon its effectiveness and severely criticized the reality that the declaration has become a mere formality. And the court also recognized that the damages continued after the compliance declaration of 2009. Now, the court had found was that the countermeasures taken by the church were only superficial. For example, the budget for donation revenue in fiscal year 2009, when the declaration was issued, was about 52.5 billion yen and 47.8 billion yen the following year, showing no significant decrease from the pre-declaration figure of 54.5 billion yen. This strongly suggests the church had intended to maintain its high level of donations in spite of the declaration system. That's what the court had found. And now there's non-operational KPIs and disciplinary system. Although the church explained that it had introduced the KPIs to evaluate legal compliance, it failed to provide substantial answers to the minister's requests during the investigation for reports of specific targets and operation status, stating that all documents already submitted are sufficient. In fact, they did not comply with the order to answer the questions. Furthermore, the court denied that while the church had internal disciplinary rules, including expulsion for violations, a case of non-compliance has never been on the agenda on the board of the officers. So there was no evidence that any sanctions or internal investigation were ever conducted. Now, I know I'm reading these legal arguments that the court had found, but now based on these detailed fact finding, I will try to explain how the logical structure of the court's legal judgment. The court's reasoning consists of four main steps. The question that the court had handled was, can these acts be considered as acts of religious corporation? Now, this question came up because it was never done in name of the Unification Church. It was done by its members, but it was never done by its representatives or in the name of the church itself. So the Unification Church argued that the similar case of corporate dissolution where the actors were limited to directors. However, the court rejected this argument, stating that it cannot be adopted. It established a criterion that even if its representative officer or other executives are not directly involved, if the act can be regarded as having been carried out as part of religious corporation operations or business in light of socially accepted ideas, it constitutes an act of corporation. And these are the things that the court had taken into mind. One, it was carried out as part of spreading of church's doctrine. Number two, it was aimed at recruiting members and having them make donations to the church. 3, possession as the practice of the church doctrine itself. 4, conducted systematically based on a uniform nationwide manual. 5, resulting in the donations ultimately belonging to the church. Considering these circumstances and the manner and attribution of the effects, the court concluded that these activities could be evaluated as being conducted in the execution of religious activities that constitute the business of the Unification Church, and therefore they constitute the act of religious corporation. Now, the second issue was, do these acts violate laws and regulations? The church argued that a violation of large laws and regulations is limited to criminal violations. The court rejected this argument, saying that it cannot be adopted. It made first clear that an act constituting a tort under the Article 709 of the Civil Code is also included in the acts that violates laws and regulations under the Articles 81 of the Religious Corporations Act. The reason given was that a tort is an act legally evaluated as unlawful, and said it's fully conceivable that such acts should be substantial harm to public welfare. Excluding them from the grounds of dissolution would contradict the purpose of the system. The court then stated that whether individual donation or solicitations constitute a tort should be judged whether the manner of solicitation deviates from what is socially acceptable. Now, this is a standard that has been accepted in most of these Japanese court cases. The court then stated that whether it specified the various factors should be considered, such as the language and manner of solicitations, the donor's judgment of financial situation, or the donation caused hardship to donor or the family. The court determined that before and after the compliance declaration, many of the donation solicitation activities by Unification Church members were unlawful torts that exceeded the socially permissible limit beyond the standard. Are these acts clearly found to harm public welfare substantially? The third step. And so what the court had taken into consideration was the scale and the continuity of the harm, the maliciousness of the act, and severity of the consequences. And considering these points, the court concluded that it is clear that the series of tortious acts by the infringing on the individual interests collectively constitute an act which is clearly found to harm public welfare substantially in violation of laws and regulations. Now, this is another issue that we had to take in mind, is that is the dissolution permissible in relation to freedom of religion? Now, this question has already been answered by the higher courts, but this is what the court said. The court defined the legal nature of dissolution order based on a Supreme Court precedent. It stated, a dissolution order does not have any legal effect of prohibiting or restricting the faith of believers or the religious acts themselves, which is true. They can worship what they want. They just lose their tax exempt status, and they also lose religious corporate status. In summary, the Tokyo District Court first meticulously established the facts based on a vast amount of evidence regarding the long-standing illegal donation solicitation by Unification Church members, including its organized, continuous, and malicious nature. Its particularly highlighted continuation of harm even after the compliance declaration and the decisive lack of organization's ability to self-purify. Then it judged these facts to constitute the acts. So the court said these acts of these illegal activities constitute the acts of Unification Church itself. It violates the laws and regulations, and are clearly found to harm public order substantially due to the scale, the maliciousness, and the continuity damage. Finally, even after giving maximum consideration to the extremely important value of religious freedom under the Constitution, the court concluded that given such immense structural problems, the complete lack of any prospect for self-improvement, allowing the church to maintain its religious corporation status any longer is not acceptable for maintaining social order. It concluded that dissolution order is the only necessary and avoidable measure that the judiciary could take. This is the logic behind the historic dissolution order. I don't know. I hope I'm sure that I have the papers, so I'll be sending it out to emails to anybody who wants it. Now, the Unification Church naturally immediately appealed this dissolution order on the same day it was issued, and the court is now proceeding in a closed hearing at the Tokyo High Court. Well, the proceeding itself was closed in the court of first instance at the Tokyo District Court as well. Now, if the Tokyo High Court upholds the dissolution order, the Unification Church can file a special appeal to the special Supreme Court on constitutional issue grounds. But however, this special appeal to the Supreme Court does not have this stay effect. Stay means does not halt the dissolution proceedings unless a separate stay of execution is obtained. Then what happens is a liquidator will be appointed, and the dissolution process will continue as soon as this decision is upheld in the Tokyo High Court, regardless of its appeal pending the Supreme Court. Also, in a separate case, the Unification Church, to be exact, the representative of the Unification Church has been sanctioned with a civil fine for failing to comply with the government's exercise of the right to question, which is the only investigation that the government could take unless it's a criminal case. The church also filed this, and in this case, the church also filed a special appeal to the Supreme Court in that case as well. And in the context of this case, the Supreme Court has already rejected the Unification Church argument regarding whether torts under civil code can constitute grounds for dissolution and the constitutionality of the principles. So My understanding is that if the Tokyo High Court upholds the dissolution order, the final dissolution decision itself is unlikely to be turned by the Supreme Court. It was a rush. Thank you for your attention.
Well, I'm Kyoko Nagano, a lawyer advocate both in Japan and New York, and part of the legal team representing victims of the Unification Church of Japan. Today, I'm honored to hear an update on the situations in Japan regarding the Unification Church. As Takashi-san mentioned, the central topic today is the dissolution order issued by the Tokyo District Court. In return, I'd like to address two key concerns. So, in my turn, I'd like to address two key concerns often raised by people in Western countries. First, whether the dissolution order amounts to religious persecution. I'd like to address the legal effect of the dissolution order and how the Christian churches operate in Japan. Second, whether the victims' claims are fabricated. In respect of this point, I'd address, can someone truly be deceived into making an offering? This question is especially relevant to the context of Western biblical traditions. First, let me begin with what is Unification Church of Japan. This point, Takashi-san has successfully explained how the Unification Church of Japan caused unparalleled harm to individuals and the society to Japan. This is we need to look at, and no improvement has been recognized. So in order to, as a measure of this situation, the dissolution order has been issued by the Court of Japan. And first point, the dissolution order. The dissolution order does not restrict religious activities, nor does it ban solicitation of offerings. What it does is just revoke the Unification Church's status as religious corporation. In Japan, a religious corporation is a government-approved legal entity recognized for the public interest. The main benefit of this status is tax exemption. So, the legal personality as a religious corporation is obtained only by approval of the government. And tax exemption is the main benefit, and the basis of this benefit is the public interest nature. So when the court finds that the religious organization has caused a substantial harm to individuals and the society of Japan, and this outcome is resulted from its activities based on its teachings, and the victim's suffering is long-lasting, I think it is reasonable that its tax-exempt status is lost. In contrast, I'd like to introduce how the Christian churches operate in Japan. Local Christian churches in Japan can operate for worship, ministry, fellowship, and discipleship as an association without becoming a religious corporation. I have some example of growing churches which operate without becoming a religious corporation. 21st Century Christ Church and the Massachusetts Church. These are wonderful churches operating in metropolitan area, but they have not obtained religious corporation status. I'd like to move to the next point. Have frames been fabricated? In this respect, I'd like to address, can deception stand regarding offering? From the Westerner's perspective, offering is an act of worship. Worship is a totally voluntary action from his heart, soul, and mind. But in Japan, traditionally, it is different. Folk religion remains deeply rooted in the hearts of many Japanese. Japan is a folk religion-based syncretism. This is the religious landscape of summarized Japan. Many Japanese embrace the idea that every part of nature possesses a spirit of a god that must be respected. This spirit can bring prosperity when pleased, or misfortune when offended. There's also a strong belief in ancestral spirits. It's thought that they reside in another world but return during festivals like Obon or Higan to watch over the living. So in Japan, we have two concepts of spirits. One is spirits in the nature, and the other is ancestral spirits. Maintaining a good relationship with these spirits is seen as essential for protection and well-being. Throughout the year, there are seasonal events that honor both nature spirits and ancestral spirits. During these times, or while sitting in front of home altar, people feel a sense of fellowship with these invisible beings. For many Japanese, spirits are like unseen companions, deserving of respect because they have the power to influence the safety and the prosperity of the living. In Japan, people traditionally offer food and money to spiritual beings as part of the fellowship with them. The goal is to please these spirits, or at least avoid offending them, so that they will grant safety and prosperity in return. Historically, and in my view, offerings in Japan are not an act of worship in Western true religious sense. Rather, they function as a kind of bargain, a transaction with spiritual beings in exchange for good fortune. So, I believe the same idea applies to the offerings made in Unification Church and now this project. Believers get money out of their hoping to secure safety and the prosperity of their families to avoid the curses the church claimed would have come upon them. This is the offering, making the offering. This type of activity is a type of bargain with a deity through the organization, in this case, the Unification Church of Japan. And it's not a typical act of worship. And similar to spiritual sales in nature. So, going back to the question, offering can be invalidated under deception. If an offering is a bargain and a bargain made under deception, its results can be invalidated. This is the legal basis for holding the Unification Church accountable for the offerings it solicited from the followers. Yes, thank you. So, the Unification Church. So, I'd like to move to the root causes for the problem. White people believe the teachings. The Unification Church remains active in Japan, unlike in Europe or the United States, and the financial harms from its practices has been reported only in Japan. Why so is that uniquely Japanese problem. One key reason is that many Japanese are unfamiliar with the Bible. This makes them more vulnerable to teachings that appear to be based on the Bible, but are actually distorted. because they don't recognize the contradictions between the Unification Church's teaching and the Bible. They are more easily misled. Another important factor is that most Japanese do not understand that in biblical tradition, offerings are acts of worship. As a result, they are more likely to comply with solicitations for offerings that imply spiritual threats and curses without realizing the religious and ethical implications. Some may argue that this is simply a matter of low religious literacy in Japan, but this argument assumes that the Bible offers a true standard, one that brings clarity and exposes deception. And going forward in its restorations, many issues remain for resolution. Addressing these issues, like financial distress, likely to require secular practical solutions, such as bringing legal claims, financial programs, and maybe provisions of harm in the future that will require legislation. And the team is working on legal actions. To the contrary, it's understandable to find solutions in delicate areas, such as family dynamics, health, or the search for the truth by turning to religion. But relying on faith in this way raises important questions. Is religion itself dangerous? Can we use it merely as a tool for personal gain as long as it seems harmless? So I believe that treating religion as a tool is inherently contradictory. Spiritual beings are believed to exist beyond human understanding and control. So attempting to use them is little sense and disregards the transcendence. This brings to us at the validity of the Bible, the foundation of the Unification Church's teachings, that the fact that the church misinterprets it means the Bible itself is unreliable. And no, the Unification Church may misinterpret or distort the Bible, but that does not undermine the Bible's truth. When we face problems rooted in faith, especially misdirection, it's crucial to return to the original source. If believers engage directly with the Bible, they can easily see that church's teachings in Japan has no real foundation in the scripture. At the same time, the Bible offers message of hope. In Japan, Christian churches and religions more broadly should prepare to give meaningful answers and support to those who have become disillusioned after following the teaching of the Unification Church. It's not enough to simply say that Unification Church's doctrines are unbiblical or wrong. Christians are called to speak the truth with love so that believers misled by false teachings may be freed and meet the light of the truth which they have been seeking. Finally, I'm concerned about the attitude of some churches in Japan that they have turned away Unification Church members who wish to attend worship services. In some cases, these believers have asked churches to stand with them as they face legal challenges. But even if churches cannot agree to that, it should not be a reason to exclude them from worship. Rejecting them risks deepening their anger and a sense of isolation. We must avoid further division. Instead, Christian churches should extend a hand, helping these individuals rebuild their understanding through the truth of the Bible and supporting them in returning to society as hopeful, contributing citizens. Thank you for listening.